Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I am so delighted to have a very special guest, Blaine Oelkers. Blaine is a lifetime entrepreneur running profitable businesses for 30 years, having done over 100 million in sales. A graduate of Purdue University and Stanford University's entrepreneurship program, Blaine owned and operated a consulting firm, a pizza franchise, four health and wellness businesses, a personal development company, and he started two social enterprises to help end malnutrition in a sustainable way. Blaine is a leading expert in personal implementation. In fact, he's America's only Chief Results Officer, overseeing over 20,000 weekly accountability check-ins from business owners every year. Blaine is the author of Think and Grow Rich, book study edition, which I'm holding here, as well as the co-author of Guerrilla Marketing on the Front Lines and The Ultimate Success Secret. Last but certainly not least, he is a TEDx speaker. And I had the privilege, the opportunity to attend his TEDx talk in person with my family and absolutely loved it. Learned so much. My daughters benefited from it. And I'm just deeply grateful that you are here with us. Welcome, Blaine.
Hey, thank you for having me. And it was 5 years ago that we kind of met in person there at that TEDx talk. So listen, honored to be here today, and just wanted to, I had looked before we started, and I think you're up over 75 episodes of this podcast. So congratulations to you. You are kind of a beacon of light for the mind of others, and I've enjoyed listening to this podcast, and now I feel super honored to be on the podcast. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Blaine. So you probably know then, since you've heard some of the episodes, that we love to kick things off with you sharing a little bit of your story. I know it's always fascinating to learn, like, how do people get from where they were to where they are now? So would you share just a little about that for us?
Yeah, sure. I think you had the book there, Think and Grow Rich, and so I want to maybe just share two quick stories that were for me moments of dawning comprehension, right? So this moment that becomes pivotal in your life, and you wonder why didn't I see this before, kind of a thing. But the luckiest moment in my life happened in college back in the 80s. So a little on the accomplished side there of life. But in the 80s, I was at Purdue University, and for some reason I ended up ordering this audio tape, which was from a company called Success Motivation Institute, and it was Earl Nightingale with an abridged version of Think and Grow Rich on audio tape, audio cassette for those, so I can fully date myself here. But I had ordered this thing, and I will say that the reason I probably ordered it was I had always been a seeker. I always, like, how can I be better? I was always kind of, a little bit wired for self-development, self-improvement. But I ordered that cassette tape, and I got it, and I listened to it, many, many times. And it was the formation for me of this idea, that you could turn. So the book is, Think and Grow Rich. Now, the riches, he does talk a lot about money and wealth, but the riches can be anything. It can be, happiness. It can be harmony. It can be anything that you desire. And so I read the book, so I ended up getting the book. And actually, here's the book I read. I have the original, the one I read back in the 80s. I still have it. It's holding together barely. But anyway, so I read that. And then it was in that reading of that book that I realized, and you've mentioned this before, that what you think about, you can bring about, right? And that you can turn your thoughts into a reality. And there's a little bit of a systematic way to do that. And so that allowed me to begin to take my dreams and turn them into reality. Now, it was like going to the gym, meaning I started small, like small things, and we're kind of like doing this every single day. You might say, oh, I'm thirsty, right? So I'm thirsty, and I just make some water, appear and happen, right? So you have a thought and you turn it into reality. But then I started doing it with bigger and bigger things. And so for me, that led to, I got a great job right out of college. I didn't stay long because I was a little bit more of an entrepreneurial, restless soul, but I went to work at Hewlett Packard, and I didn't even last a full year there. And then I went to Citicorp Industrial Credit, and I lasted a little while there. Then I went to Magnavox, lasted a little while there. Then I finally got my own. I knew I wanted to be my own business owner, so I went and I did become a franchisee with Domino's Pizza. And I had some, continuing success, but it was based around what I ended up calling Waiteba, and did my TEDx talk. What you think about, you bring about. But that gave me more and more success, and I had enough. Oh, she's got her sticker there. Nice. I had enough success that I had an opportunity to buy an original copy of Think and Grow Rich. So there are only 5,000 printed. That first printing was 5,000. It looked like this. This is the book right here. Much different than what I read here. But the interesting thing is that when I opened up this book, and I got to the first page here, and it says, "What do you want most?" And I'm like, I never read that. So I went back to get my little paper copy here and I looked, and it was actually kind of revised in 1960, and it wasn't in there. And I realized, wait a second, these books are different. And the first 2 pages, which we could talk about in detail if you'd like, were instructional pages. And I at that time, I call them your bring about statement. What you think about your bring about. My bring about statement was to build $1 million business, a business that was worth $1 million. And so currently, I was maybe a third of the way there, maybe a little less than a third of the way there. And I had a plan, 3 to 5 year plan. But when I applied those 2 major instructions, I was there in 5-6 months. And so I had this catapult, and Napoleon Hill talks about this. And I think even you've talked about where, you have this desire, this thing that you're holding in your mind, and you're really thinking about it and all the things you can do. And you bring it top of mind, and you program your RAS, the reticular activating system, in the back of your mind. And then when the opportunity appears, it's the right one. And so for me, I had a business. And at the time, all of a sudden, there was a slight opportunity that I could buy and merge my business with another business. And as soon as that popped up, I just dropped everything and I went right for that, because I knew that was it. And that's what it was. So I merged in, and that business is still running today, and generating great kind of passive cash flow for me. But anyway, so the book was radically different. I noticed that many other things, there were parts that were dropped from the book. There was the way that Napoleon Hill wrote the original. He did a lot of typing in all caps, almost like shouting stuff to you. Anyway, so that was a big moment of dawning comprehension, was that book, and then the subsequent figuring out of that. The second thing that kind of shaped my life and really led me to this become, a chief results officer. And I went to the patent office and I got the registered trademark. So I'm the only one in America. But what led me to that was that I was working a corporate job, and my son was born, and he was about a year old. And I came home from a business trip. My degree's in computer science. And so I came home from that, and my son, Bo, was giving me the cold shoulder. And I'm like, Beth, my wife, Beth, why is Bo giving me the cold shoulder? He goes, well, you were gone so long, he kind of forgot who you were. And then my heart just kind of like sunk. And that night I felt terrible. And that night I made a decision. I call it a clarifying decision, which kind of eliminates a whole bunch of other noise in your life. And that was that I was going to work from home, that no matter what it took, I was going to work from home, and I wasn't going to be forgotten again. Now, if I regress and I go back into my childhood and realize that I came home to an empty house and both my parents worked, and I was probably have all these deep-seated reasons to be a stay-at-home dad or parent. But it took me a year. But after that year, I was out of there. I was free. I was working, from home, had my own business. And my wife, who likes security, she's like, well, if your business is as big as your regular job, then we'll build up some money, then you can leave that job. So it took a year, but a year we got out of there, and that was 27 years ago. And I've kind of been a stay at home ever since. Now the kids went to college and have their own careers and are out of the nest now. But that was a defining moment for me. And when I made that decision, having a regular job, all that went by the wayside. But once I got out of my job, then there was a freedom and there was a time to really take what maybe my giftings were around organizing and what I call personal implementation, helping people get stuff done personally. I was able to really dive into that now for a number of decades. And now I do oversee a lot of weekly check-ins, and I kind of, it's not that hard. It's not that complex. But I think we can, and we can talk more about that, but helping people get results. That's where I am today. That's what I'm doing. That's what I love to do. I feel like I'm on the planet to help people take control of their lives by taking control of themselves. And you and your podcast here go into the number one thing you can work on, which is your mindset. And it all flows from the mindset. So there's a couple of stories. I don't know if you have any questions, but I need to take a drink and let you speak.
Well, as you refresh, I just want to say thank you for those stories, because it's really fun to hear how people came about, right? How they created what they created. How did those ideas flow? And oftentimes the ideas flow from moments of darkness, if you will, right? Moments of, let's say, sadness, right? When you came home and your son gave you the cold shoulder, right? That's not a happy moment, so to speak, but it birthed an idea, clarity, and momentum towards change. And then we get to the implementation part. How do we make it happen? And tuning into that guidance, right? So when the idea came, to merge with your friend, merge the businesses, right? You followed that, you took action on that, you trusted that intuition. And so one of the things that some of the people listening might be wondering is, what is that formula? What are the key things that people need to learn from you today to make it easier for them to have their form of freedom?
Yeah, I think two things. One is that the thing that made the difference for me was those two instructional pages in the front of the original, right? And they had two concepts there. The first page was, what do you want most? And you talk about this very eloquently, which is gaining clarity, right? You have to know what you want. Now, if you're like, I'd like better health. Well, your mind doesn't do well at just processing that. It can. It's better than not thinking about it. But the more specific you can get, the more clarity, the more, stop running in the fog and really get dialed in where you want. I call it your point B. We talk about going from point A to point B, but really dial in that point B. What is it that you really want? Spend some time there. That was what he said. Before you even read this book, figure that out. And then once you have that desire, hopefully it's a burning desire. If it's not a burning desire, maybe it's not the right thing for you, but gain clarity where you want. And then the second page was all about community, which was interesting because that wasn't what I was doing with the book. And the fact that you needed to have, he kind of went on to talk about mastermind. Many people know about mastermind groups. I think you do a lot of work with Vistage, which is basically kind of like a mastermind group, but you had to experience the book, read the book, in community with others to tap into their minds, to tap into their ideas, and that the sum of the brains was not equal. So in other words, if I could come up with 10 ideas to build my business, and if I told you about my business, you could come up with 10 ideas. But if you and I talk about those 20 ideas, we'd come up with 30 more or 50 more, right? So it's 1 + 1 = 5. So that was what I ended up doing. Was I already kind of was dialed in on what I wanted, but I did book studies, and that's why I ended up making a book study edition. Is I did 5 book studies in a row, 5 months in a row, back to back to back with different people, and that really kind of turbocharged things, and that was what led me to figure out that I could buy this other business and merge it with mine. But those two things are big. And then the you even have a quote about this. Whatever the mind can conceive, believe, and achieve, it can achieve, right? And so if you distill Think and Grow Rich, if you want to go down to 3 words, that's it: conceive, believe, achieve. So first you have to conceive it. You have to have that thought. What is it that you want? You have to dial that in and then test drive it. So when you test drive the thought, if you're like, you have this desire, this you're conceiving this thing that you want to bring about. And if you're not willing to set the alarm for 30 minutes early to wake up and work on it, it might not be right for you, right? So conceive. So once you have the thought of what you want, then believe. And the book is really good about teaching you how to build faith. Now, there isn't many places that I can go in this world to build faith in an idea, to build self-confidence, to build the belief. And so he'll have you, do exercises and write things out and repeat things and memorize things. But you building faith is really you thinking about it and the possibilities of it, and maybe even programming your brain, subconsciously, but consciously. You attended the TEDx talk, where a big part of the TEDx talk was writing down what you wanted on a card, taking a picture of it, and making that your unlock screen, right? So if you can see it every day. So that's one, if I were to end today with an action step, that would be one of them. Conceive, believe, and then achieve. So the nice thing about what I like to say, what you think about, you bring about, is that it's not just the law of attraction, which is powerful, but it's the law of attraction with action. So the achieve part means you have to get going. And so the Think and Grow Rich is all about making an initial plan, like make an initial plan this weekend. It doesn't have to be perfect, just initial, and then start going and start moving, right? And so, there's that great quote about, you can't steer a parked car, right? So you got to get moving, but it's in the movement, it's in the experiences that you're going to figure out the next step. So that's, there's got to be a doing part. And that I was always really good at that. And that was where I gravitated towards in the end, is helping people do that. And early in my career too, I was doing, a lot of direct sales. That's how I got the 100 million, but they're direct sales with a group of people, where it's independent distributors. And if you can't motivate them to take action, you're going no place. So anyway, it was in that kind of arena that I was able to really kind of refine some of those skills. But again, conceive, believe, achieve. That's it. But getting into action, taking the time to shut the world out, gain clarity, then taking the time to build your faith in your idea. There's lots of ways to do that in the book. And then it's you doing stuff, you setting out to achieve it. So those are really probably the main things.
Well, it is so exciting for me to hear you share these, because I really do believe that these are the keys to success, because most people jump right into action or right into strategy, right? How do I do this thing I need to do? And they don't really take the time to get very clear about what is most important to them, what they most value, how they want to feel. There is a conditioning of like, I just need to do, I need to be busy, right? Many of us have learned that that's the key to success, is to work hard and achieve. And many of us don't often pause to say, well, what do I actually want? So for those individuals that are listening to you today and saying, I would really love to be able to identify that one thing, but I don't know what that is, or there are many things that I could imagine doing. What guidance might you have for them to access that desire?
Yeah. So, I there's something called mind dumping, right? Where you spend time taking stuff out of your head and putting it on paper, right? So I think that is super helpful. It's something I do every week. I take 90 minutes on a Friday to kind of plan my next week, but do a mind dump. I take a little longer at the end of the month. At the end of the year, I like to take a whole weekend and just begin to create, right? So you kind of make it up, then you make it happen. But if you're struggling with that, it depends on the person, but there's some exercises you could do to reveal a little bit more of your direction and maybe your purpose and your passion. And so a couple of those exercises, one interesting one is that you imagine. There's a couple different ways people do this. I like this more positive way to do it. But you imagine your 100th or maybe now 120th birthday party. And there you are at the party. You're in good shape. You've got full mental capacities. You've got lean muscle mass. Everything's great. But you're sitting there kind of to the side as people are coming up and talking about you and your life. So what do they say? What do the people that work with you say? What do the people from your community say? What do the people, family and friends, how are they remembering you? What does the community say that you did? Or maybe, the different organizations you're a part of, right? So living that in your mind and writing it down. And then some people just audio record it. They say, well, I'm doing this and so said this and so said that. And now it's just transcription software. It's easy to turn that into words, but record that in some way, written or audio, and live through that. And that gives you a picture of what you want out in the future. Two other ones that we use a lot in workshops. The other one is, I call it the Powerball test. So now you've heard of the Powerball lottery, right? Okay, so Powerball lottery, whenever it gets like above 400 million, my wife and I, we will buy one ticket. Now, we don't buy a lot of tickets, we buy one. If the universe says it's time, one ticket will do. So we buy one ticket. But that exercise is that you won the Powerball alone, just you. So you won $500 million. And it's just you. And so you pay taxes and all that, whatever. So maybe you have $200-300 million after the taxes. And then you spend a year partying and just celebrating, setting up trust funds, giving away cars, buying mansions, whatever you want to do with it, giving to the charities of your choice, setting everything up. You just live life, everything you ever want to do. You do that for 1 year. Now, 1 year goes by, and now all that's down. You've done all the physical things you want to, travel the world, grandkids are all set, everything's done. You still have 100 million in the bank, and you wake up after the 1 year. What do you do then? So now kind of in that exercise, your mind is kind of untethered, right? And it's interesting, 90% of the people in the workshops, when I do that live, they'll say, well, I want to help people blank. Now the blank is different for everybody, right? So I want to help people with personal implementation. If I won the Powerball, I'd still be doing this podcast. So anyway, you begin to discover what is your core passions, through that exercise. One last exercise that I like that people find very valuable is the Wall Street Journal exercise. And this is from a business standpoint. And so you go out some distance, could be 1 year, could be 5 years, could be 10 years. But the Wall Street Journal is doing an article about you and your business. And so you think about you start by just thinking, what would the headline be? Right. Mine, a while back, was TEDx, Arizona TEDx speaker becomes America's chief results officer. Right. And then, so what does all that mean? Now you write the headline as a starter, because that's fast. Then if you want, you bullet point an article and you actually write the article. But even just bullet pointing the article, here's what they said about us. Here's the sales we hit. Whatever those metrics are for you, whatever's most important for you. Before my metric was $1 million, but now it's like it's people served. Like my current bring about statement is this: a new channel of my business is to grow it to be serving 334 business owners, right? So. But anyway, that Wall Street Journal is a fun one to do, and sometimes it's interesting to do that as a team as well, if you're managing a team.
Wow. Well, all three of the ideas are incredible. And I imagine that many of the people who are kind of tuning into that maybe even did that exercise in real time, right? Each of those as you were speaking. I know I did. I had all kinds of things flowing through my mind. So thank you for that gift. And it really is exciting to be able to go to that place where, we don't have those attachments, right? We don't need to do for others. And we can just really focus on what would delight us, what would make us feel alive, give us that energy that we seek. And so it brings me to the point of emotion, because when we can get out of our head all the stuff that we need to do and really tune into what would make us feel the way that we want to feel, the exercise of what we want to do shifts, because then we give ourselves permission to kind of set aside all the shoulds, all the things that we should do, and really focus on, well, what do I really want to do? If I wasn't tethered to that, what would I actually want? And so Napoleon Hill speaks of this concept of desire. Yeah, this kind of all the ships are burned, right? It's going for it all the way type of desire, that burning desire. And faith, as you said, right? Really developing that sense of belief, right? That it is possible for you, that's available for you, right? Getting to a point of expectation. And what's really exciting, Blaine, is that we now have some research, whether it's research from quantum physics or research from Lynn McTaggart's work on intention and group intention, like the mindset, the mastermind principle, that a lot of the things that Napoleon Hill said are actually true from a scientific perspective, from a brain science perspective. So, in your TED Talk, you mentioned the reticular activating system. Would you be willing to share what that is for people listening?
Yeah, yes. And like you said, it's interesting that a lot of things that, close to 100 years ago, or maybe some parts of the book were written even before that, 100 years ago, that he wrote this stuff. And it is, science is kind of proving it out on a even sometimes on a brain chemical, and physical level, right? So that's really cool. But there is the reticular activating system. It's in the back of the brain, and it's kind of like the executive secretary of the conscious mind. And it's the thing that says, okay, here's a thought that you want to bring to to the conscious mind, because you would go crazy if you were thinking about all the things that are happening right now. Your breathing and your blood and all the different sounds and all the things you're seeing and all that. So basically, to keep you sane, the reticular activating system only lets certain things through. But it is something that through repetition, spaced repetition, or enlightenment, you can tune that to a different station or to certain stations, let's say. So for example, the example I use, which everyone can relate to, is, if you buy a new car, like my son purchased his first car, it was a maroon Acura, TL, I think it was. And so all of a sudden I'm seeing that car, even in that color, all over town. But they were always all over town, but I wasn't tuned into that, right? And that's why it becomes what Napoleon Hill says is that you've got to keep programming that. You've got to keep top of mind. What you think about, you bring about, but you've got to come up with ways to program the reticular activating system through spaced repetition. That's why in the book he'll say, in the morning, I want you to read aloud your bring about statement, the thing that you're trying to bring about, and right before you go to bed. Two key programming times for the reticular activating system. One at night, because at night a lot your brain, even chemically is storing things and working, while you're sleeping, and then in the morning to decide what it's going to show you. And so, in my own personal life, when I told that story about I'm looking for this opportunity to build $1 million business, I'm looking. The minute, hearing something about it was like I was in a room and someone said something about needing to sell their business. And I just tuned right into that, because I had that pre-programming done. So programming that reticular activating system for what you want is key. And then stepping in that direction when it provides you, with something is also key. But spaced repetition, what you want, you can think about it. You could, some people make audio recordings and play it of themselves saying it. I like to hand write. I believe there's a connection between writing and the brain. So I hand write my little bring about statement every morning on my daily, sheet. I use a calendar, but I still like pad and paper for my daily, my daily list, so to speak. And anyway, so I write it out. And there's a difference in programming when you write it out versus if you just read it, versus if you write it in cursive, which is interesting to write it in cursive. It's also different if you write it with your non-dominant hand. Then you could write it with your non-dominant hand in cursive. Then you could write it with your dominant hand in cursive, but backwards by using a mirror. Anyway, so we won't go, there are whatever levels you want to take it to. But I always say the most important next step is the one you'll take. So if it's you just reading it or whatever, it's putting it on your unlocked screen on your phone and seeing it subconsciously. Whatever step you'll take is the best next step. But know that you can go as deep as you want in a lot of these things.
Thank you for explaining that so well. And there are so many ways, as you said, to really fire and wire, if you will, those networks in the brain specifically related to what we want, right? To keep that top of mind, to help the reticular activating system tune in to ideas, possibilities, synchronicities that align with what it is that we are seeking.
Yeah, and one other point about that, vision boards is a good example of that. One other point about that white table, what you think about, you bring about, and the reticular activating system is if you desire to make a change, you need to, the best method of change is to flood your reticular activating system with inputs that are, that are in alignment with where you want to go. And what I mean by that is that one of the biggest takeaways someone could take away from today is to change your inputs based on what you want to do. So for example, if you want to build your mindset, you would want to, instead of listening to the radio in the car, you'd want to listen to your podcast, these episodes like this, right? But then you'd want to flood yourself with, people who are working on their mindset. Be around people that are working on their mindset. Eat the foods that feed the mind. You want to just immerse yourself in that, and that's where people make the big change, and that's where people sustain the motivation to make the change, is that they're flooding themselves with podcasts and reading books and listening to audios and taking workshops, and eating the right foods and being around the right people and all those things. There's so much of your day that you control, that you got to surround yourself with what you want to bring about. And that's what happens, because most people give up because they don't make enough progress. And so you've got to make measurable progress in a reasonable amount of time. And sometimes you got to chunk it way down, nano-size it. But it's the feeling of the progress. We're wired for progress. Dopamine chemicals will keep you going. But you've got to kind of, one, get in the right direction, which you can change overnight. Immediately, you can change your direction and then start moving towards that direction. That's the biggest thing. And the way people do that is by changing all their inputs and their environment to match that. I like to say, there's a saying, the solution to pollution is dilution. And that's really the key, is that I know that I've got to put 10 times more positive in. So if I have a negative 10 minutes, I need 100 minutes of positive to wash that out. And I use audio programs that save me to kind of hack the head trash. We all have this head trash, but if you can get that voice down small and keep it in the corner, it never goes away. But that's, that's a really big thing, for me is changing the environment, flooding the inputs. That's where you kind of get the change and you're able to stick with it.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Blaine. And the time of the day I know also matters from the book. Napoleon Hill speaks of doing it as soon as you wake up in the morning, when the brain is more suggestible, or kind of before falling asleep at night. Once again, that your subconscious mind can really kind of absorb all those inputs, all those sensory inputs that you spoke about. I watch a mind movie every morning that has my goals, that has my affirmations. My eldest daughter, Maya, actually makes them. I'll put a little plug in for her. Her company's called Infinity Mind Movies, because it really is that full experience, because we want to feel those emotions. So I'm really grateful that you're bringing this up. And this kind of brings up to the point of imagination, because when we speak of really, whether it's vision boards or, experiencing what it is that we want, we're inviting the power of imagination. So what do you know from your experience from reading multiple times Think and Grow Rich? What is important about imagination for people to know?
Yeah. So imagination, the cool thing about imagination, I like Albert Einstein. He's a pretty smart guy. And he said, knowledge is limited to everything that we now know, but imagination is unlimited to all we will ever know. And so, this concept of, kind of the finite mind and the infinite mind, and Napoleon Hill talks about, infinite intelligence, whatever you believe on the spiritual side, and tapping into that power through your imagination. But no, the imagination, he calls it the workshop of the mind. And that is, where you come up with ideas for things, right? And you're never defeated, as long as you may need a new plan. But unless you give up, you're never defeated, because through your imagination, you can create a new plan, right? And your imagination is somewhat like a muscle, meaning that many of us stop using our imagination. We don't do anything that's very imaginative or creative, and it can atrophy, right? But you can bring it back. And so there's lots of ways to increase your imagination. Again, immersion into, the arts, right? Science now has proven listening to certain types of classical music improves studying, right? Improves memory, improves retention, improves imagination. So there's that. The creative arts, drawing, doodling, things like that can bring it out. I also like technology, right? So when we're doing brainstorming sessions, if we hit any kind of a snag, there's a website. There's a website called Random Word Generator, Random Number Generator. Either one of those, you go, and it's a site that will provide you. You can just say, "Give me 5 random nouns," and it'll just give you random words. But those words will make connections in your brain, right? And then you'll be able to think of things that can help you through that. So creativity, because the internet is boundless, but you need to develop your own creativity and open the door to that creativity. Don't, there's a lot of writing about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. So having that growth mindset, realizing there's possibilities and looking for those possibilities, they're always there. I mean, you talk about that, the seed of greater benefit in every problem, right? No matter what it is, the crisis is the catapult, and so there's so many silver linings. If you're willing to look for them and to focus in on them, you'll find them. They'll grow. What you think about, you bring about. So but the other side of the river, he talks about the stream of life. The other side is also there, and it's hard. Napoleon Hill wishes the book is an oar that can move you from one side of the river to the other. Because if you're in the river of negativity, that is a hard river to get out of. And so that's the solution to pollution is dilution. You really got to get around the right people, the right books, the right podcasts, and pull yourself ever so slightly out of there. It is not an easy transition. And I fall into that river every so often. And then I've got to kind of power my way out of there. But back to imagination. So yeah, the imagination is something you can develop. It's great to do with other people. And running through any kind of creative stuff really helps to do that. He's a big fan of talking to people through your imagination, through your mind. He has this concept of invisible counselors. And it was interesting in the book, the first book that I read, he had 9 invisible counselors that he talked to in his mind, sitting at a table, which really, and what helped his imagination is he studied each one of them, right? So like I've read so many books and seen videos of Napoleon Hill, I can have a pretty good conversation with him in my mind, but also like Ben Franklin and other people. But when I read the original one, he says he had 50 different counselors, and he mentioned about 30 of them. So which was really interesting for me to see all those other people that he was talking with to help build his imagination.
This is so cool, Blaine. Thank you. And what comes to mind right now, I'm a trainer with a research institution called the Institute of Heart Math.
Yeah.
And one of the techniques that we use that has been studied quite a bit, especially with serial entrepreneurs around the effectiveness of it, is a technique called freeze frame, where we tune in to how we feel about a particular challenge, issue, or opportunity. We get coherent using tools like the quick coherence technique. And then we ask for guidance. So, who are we asking guidance from? Right? Heart math would call it non-local intuition, information that is in the field around our body, information beyond time and space. And so when you share Napoleon Hill having, these 50 individuals, 30 of which were written about in that special edition, it's very exciting, because my belief is that he accessed that guidance, which steered him in certain directions, right? The path of least resistance, if you will, to be able to impact so many lives well beyond his own life.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the most fascinating parts of the book that it's been studied, but I don't know that it's come to major views yet. But there is this fact of, that we are all transmitting stations for thoughts, ideas, feelings. Like I can walk into a room and I can know that something's wrong. And without even maybe seeing anyone's face. Animals seem to do this well. Babies seem to know this well. So there's an intuition there, but I believe that the intuition is a physical thing, and they've studied that, and the Ryan Institute and other people are studied things like that. But I haven't seen a tremendous amount of science. But I know from myself that it's there, and I'm excited to see that grow, so that people realize that their thoughts are floating around out there, and there's a lot of other people's thoughts that can also be brought in and become part of that intuition. And that intuition, Napoleon Hill, he loved that. I mean, he loved the intuition. He said, there's a whole chapter on decision, and he says, you're based on facts and feelings. But feelings and intuition and the sixth sense has a whole nother chapter on that, is really the key to that. And if you asked him, I've got to make a decision, should I flip a coin? He hated that because he said, then you're leaving it to chance and you're missing the opportunity to go into your gut, and let that make the decision. Even if it's wrong, you're going to learn something. And I don't know if it was last year or the year before, the cells that make up the brain, they found that in your gut, in your physical gut, there are some similar type of cells, that there's almost a little brain in your gut. So science is catching up, but that's exciting. And you don't have to wait on the science. You can begin to try it for yourself. See if you, but it is something to develop, right? It's something to work on and get quiet and listen, and trust and move forward with it. And go into a room and try to perceive things without, before you hear things, So anyway, I think I really enjoy that, and I enjoy what you were saying about that.
Blaine, as we kind of come towards completion here, would you be willing to share what that bring about statement is? I know people can certainly access it in your book. What is that statement that you invite people to repeat, to focus on, to imagine, to feel their way into?
Yeah, great question. So the bring about statement is just, what are you trying to bring about, in your life? And Napoleon Hill, there's an acronym, SMART goals. I use an acronym, SMARTer goals. I add an ER onto it. But basically, you want the statement to be specific, right? Measurable, kind of achievable, attainable, relevant to you. You want a timetable to it. It should be energizing, and it should be recorded. That's the little SMARTer acronym. But basically, so it needs to be very specific, very exact. And then you start saying it, and you start to build the belief in the faith. Now, a formal bring about statement would then include things like, what are you going to give in return? So again, Napoleon Hill's like, hey, no free lunch here. You need to say, what are you going to give in return? The universe is going to bring this to you, or you're going to create it inside your own universe. But what are you going to do to make that happen? And then I like to add rewards and other things to it. But the main thing is that you get real specific and real clear about what you want. And you can have a really big one that's way out there, but also I encourage people to make smaller ones and test it out. Do little ones, like, there's some new movie you want to see. Make that your little bring about statement. I'd like to see this movie. Okay, well, get real specific. When do you want to see it? With whom? And then you'll notice that those things start to happen. Whatever it is that you want to, bring about in your life, you can start to make that happen. And I know we're kind of running out of time here, but once you get your direction, like your point B, then the most important thing is that you start to move towards that. Now, their point A, like where you are today and coming up with a plan and all that, is important, but not as important as the journey of now moving towards that point B. So maybe at some point, if you have people back on, I could come on and talk a little bit more on the strategies, the nuts and bolts of the how-to, which is what my favorite topic, personal implementation, is, in how you can create habits very quickly, and how you can get this stuff done, and you already know how to do it. I mean, I'll leave the audience with this one, which is, I have this thing, I call it the 30-minute hour, right? How to get an hour's worth of stuff done in just 30 minutes. Well, you know how to do this already, because you've done it. And the day that you did, the most productive day of anybody, you get 3 to 10 times more stuff done the day before vacation. Now, why is that? Why is that? The day before vacation, you crush it because you have a nice reward at the end, but because you made a list, you got determined, there's no TV, there's no chit chat. You got very focused on what you had to do. You had to delegate stuff. You had to get it done. And you can take elements of that and just add it, not the stress part, but you can add elements of that into your day, and focus in on what really needs to get done with a very focused attitude. It doesn't, just a few hours of focused time every day will make that personal implementation go way, way up.
Fascinating. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about your work, Blaine, is that you are quite a master of the mind and how to utilize all of these timeless tools. And at the same time, the focus on that personal implementation, on results, on taking those actions. And as we take the actions, tuning in to what feels right, and of course, adjusting, being flexible and adaptable. But the action piece is so important. And that's one of the things that I really value about the gifts that you bring into our world. So thank you again, Blaine. How can people learn more about you, your many programs to help them get from point A to point B and enjoy the journey?
I'll go with single focus here. Make it easy. So Blaine, 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 TEDx.com. So Blaine, TEDx.com. If you go there, you can opt in and get the TEDx, a copy of the TEDx talk that I did and a transcription of it. But then you'll get to know me. A little email series will introduce you to me. And then any of my resources, some of my past articles and all that stuff is all included in that, and I'd love to get to know you all in the audience there and figure out a way that I can help you with your personal implementation.
Oh, with all my heart, Blaine, thank you for your very generous time today, your wisdom, sharing Napoleon Hill's wisdom with our world. It's much needed these days. It really can be easier to get what we want, and it's important that people know how to do it and get some support to do it. So thank you for offering that to all of us today.
Well, thank you for having me, and you're helping me fulfill what I feel is my mission in life. So I really appreciate that. And again, like I said at the top of the show, you are kind of a beacon of light for the mind, and what you're doing. The cool thing about what you're doing is that not only is it touching people's lives now, but because you put it online, what you're doing, even what we did today, is going to touch the lives of those not yet born. And that's pretty cool. So maybe somebody out will listen on Mars someday. So who knows? But we're out there to help people, and you're doing a great job doing it.
Thank you, Blaine. Same to you.